And of course, we're on the night side of Mars here, so we'll go ahead and rotate our spaceship around to see the surface of Mars here. And as you can see, Mars is known as, of course, the red planet. And well, here's the thing. Mars, the reason why it looks red is because most of the surface of Mars is made up of something called rust. You've all seen rust, right? On a nail, on a car, or along, something that's been weathered over time, like a building. Rust is everywhere, but rust is everywhere on Mars. The soil of Mars is basically rust. So Mars is a rusty nail, if you will. But what I'm going to do now, though, is this is a cool area to look at on Mars, but really there are some other cool areas on Mars to look at. So we're going to go ahead and spin Mars around until we get the areas on Mars that I really want to talk about. I'm going to zoom us into an area of Mars called the Valles Marineris. And no, it's not made out of marinara sauce. This is the largest canyon in the entire solar system. Let's start from one end to the other. So we'll start over here, and we'll work our way around. Now, can anyone tell me what the largest canyon on Earth is? There we go. Couldn't think of it for a second. The Grand Canyon. Now, Grand Canyon is about 200 miles across. It's about a mile deep. Well, let me tell you this. You see this opening right here? This area right here. That is one little tiny area of this canyon. You could fit the Grand Canyon along that. And also, the cliff walls of this are 3 times the size of the cliff walls of the Grand Canyon. This canyon is over 2,000 miles across. Remember, the Grand Canyon is only 200. So we'll go ahead and move ourselves towards the opposite end. Now, if you look closely, these cliff walls right here, anybody want to tell me what the tallest mountain on Earth is? Mount Everest. It's about 29,000 feet. It's also about 5 miles high. These cliffs, if you're standing on top of this cliff right here, looking down, and you put Mount Everest there, the peak of Mount Everest would barely be peeking out from the cliff wall. Those are over 5 miles high in cliffs. And by the way, if you were standing here, looking over here, that's like looking from Jacksonville, Florida to Key West. That's a big canyon, isn't it? That's a mega canyon. Just to give you guys a sense of scale of how big these things are. And that's not even the biggest part of the canyon. This right here, this big opening, is about the size of Texas. So again, this is a mega canyon. Now, how did this canyon form? Well, unlike the Grand Canyon is formed by the carving out by the Colorado River over billions of years. This thing, it's a piece of Mars that actually broke apart, basically snapped, kind of like a rip, if you will. Think about breaking a piece of bread, or all of a sudden, cutting through something. Basically, something happened on the surface of Mars that split open. And that's what happened here. It's a big rift valley. But there's a part of this canyon called the Noctis Labyrinthus that formed just a tad bit different. This area here on the left side of the canyon, this formed very similar to canyons on Earth. All of these walls here were formed by water, liquid water. They carved out all of those canyon walls there. The question is, what happened to the liquid water? Well, it froze. See, Mars does have water, but not in liquid, but in what? Ice. All the water we find on Mars is found in ice. And most of that is actually underneath the surface. Somebody asked me one time, what would it be like to colonize Mars? Well, you see in those science fiction movies that all the civilizations live on top of Mars? I don't think that's right. The best way to live on Mars is actually underground. It shields you from the really thin atmosphere. By the way, the atmosphere is so thin on Mars, it doesn't protect you from the radiation from the sun. So you need to shield yourself from the radiation. But also, all the water is underneath the surface. So wouldn't it make sense to have your civilization underneath where you can harness that water, and so that would make more sense. So most likely, if we were to live on Mars, we would live underground. And just think of the humans that would live on Mars underground. It'd be like cave people, right? So it'd be kind of interesting to think about the changes of humanity if they lived on Mars. But that's for a whole other science. I mean, you could write a whole science fiction story about that, right? Okay, so we're going to go ahead now and fly ourselves out a little bit. But we have some other things I want to talk about. See these things that look like pimples on Mars? Well, these are volcanoes. Huge, huge volcanoes. See, Mars was a very active planet a long time ago. But something happened. We just don't know for sure what actually happened to Mars. Somehow Mars just stopped, spewing out lava and having liquid water, and something happened. We still don't know 100% for sure what happened. And that's where science continues to, learn about that stuff. Well, I'm going to take you guys to a mega mountain. Look at that. That is Olympus Mons. It's the largest mountain in the entire solar system. Now, how big is this mountain? Well, first off, does anybody want to tell me what the largest mountain on Earth is? It's not Mount Everest. Mount Everest is the tallest peak, but mountain in general. Do you know? You got really excited for a second there, and I was like, oh, he knows. Oh, okay. No worries. I'll give you guys a hint. It's a tropical paradise. People go to it all the time. Hawaii, yes. The big island of Hawaii is the largest mountain on Earth. Most of it's underneath the water. It's underneath the Pacific Ocean. But if you drain, not underneath, but it's underwater. But if you were to drain the Pacific Ocean from the base of the mountain to the top, it's about 5.5 miles high. And it's a pretty substantial sized mountain. But this guy right here, this Olympus Mons, is 18 miles high. If you were standing at the peak right about here, you would technically be in outer space. Yeah, you'd literally be in outer space. You would see the curvature of Mars from the peak or the summit of Olympus Mons. And those cliff walls you see hanging around it, Mount Everest would barely reach the tip of those cliffs. And you could fit 2 states of Florida side by side. That's how big this mountain is. So, see, Mars is like Texas. Everything is big on Mars. Really big. But there's a couple other really interesting spots on Mars. We're going to go up to the top here, and we're going to take a look at the ice cap. And the ice cap is where we have evidence of actual surface ice water. Why? Because the temperatures are there so cold that it allows for water ice to exist on the surface. Now, during the winter months, the atmosphere of Mars is just a little bit of carbon dioxide. And it gets so cold at the poles on Mars that it actually freezes over the water. It freezes dry ice. How many of you have seen dry ice? It's actually colder than water ice. And it actually creates a layer of frozen carbon dioxide during the winter months. So not only do you have frozen water, but you also have frozen carbon dioxide. So all kinds of interesting ices.